Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. I'd like to welcome you to the A&D Eco-Alert Zone webinar, making it easier to drive in unknown cities and countries. My name is Caroline Bombard. I'm the head of marketing at A&D, and I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, our CEO, Thierry Jaccoud, and Brittany Beagle, our senior data analyst. Those will be your two presenters and panelists for today. And before we begin, I'd like to outline a few housekeeping rules. And so you'll be joining in listen-only mode, but you'll be able to enter any questions you have in the chat at any time during the presentation, and we'll address those questions at the end. You will also receive a copy of the slides and the recording, and I'd like you to enjoy this webinar. So without further ado, well, actually, before we begin, I'd like to ask our participants a question about, so that we know which industry you come from. And I'll give everyone 30 seconds to fill in.
Very good. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Also, here's Thierry Jaccoud. Good to have you here. So, I see the attendees is piling up. So, everyone seems to be on time. We're going to have we are really going to make a one-on-one short session. So, we should be ready at a given time. Good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. So now over to you, Thierry, for an introduction into A&D.
Yeah. So our presentation will have just two parts, just a short intro, and then I would say more like a technical explanation of how this works. So we'll just take the intro, company history in short. It's a long history, but we've been founded in 1984. The reason why I'm talking this is that two founders, Mr. Abick and Mr. Deckers, really the one that gave the name to the company. That's why it's called A&D and not AND. Those days we were really in PC publishing and data compression and other technical products, including maps. In 1996 we went public on the stock exchange, where we still are today. Since 2001, focusing really mainly on digital mapping and data and the route planning around it. 2008, we launched our first full navigable map of Western Europe, above and beyond. It's a digital map that we have on a global basis. And in 2015, the same for North America. In 2018, we launched our first HD map sample. Yeah, I personally joined in February last year as a new CEO. Last year, end of last year, we launched the new Untitled Zones family, which one of the new product we talk today is part of, and we also start our developer portal as an e-commerce. This year we had a new CFO joining, Ivo, and we launched a series of products. And the turnaround has been started, and you see the first half year was a good half year. And yes, we launched in September the new innovative product, the Eco-Alert Zones and the outdoor venue plan. We will focus today on the Eco-Alert Zones. Company overview again. We're headquartered in Capelle and IJssel, near Rotterdam. You see our building on the right side, which most of our people now obviously work from home due to COVID. Yeah, we're traded as and.is. We have about 20 people roundabouts in our headquarters. And we have a production in India. We have been having that since 1999, to my memory, where we collaborate and work very intimately to create our content products. We really focus on location-aware content, the creation, delivery, and service of it, and yeah, trust by emerging global brands. And as a small company, we're flexible and fast. That's what you would see. So in terms of just an overview of what kind of product and services we offer today, on the left side you see services. As you know, a long history in map making. We offer our knowledge of creating location content to other map makers and other content makers, which include research, the collection, consolidation of location-aware content, and up to what we just launched as well, the outdoor venue plan, which is basically a map creation service for outdoor venues, and a full solution. In the middle pillar, if you see, if you like, we see our let's say basic products or basis products, which are obviously our digital map that we just talked about, and the according APIs for location or planning that are built on it. And on the right side, the pillar was the premium product, the highlight zones family, which we will highlight today, and also speed limits and so other innovations that are coming. Talking of highlight zones, it's a family of products that again we have initiated last year. It's a suite of map agnostic content product. It's not a map. And on the left side, you see what we call safety alert zones. It's a dedicated set of location data that help alerting for potential risk and accidents for mobility users, pedestrian. We have a set in the middle that's called eco alert zones, what we will talk about today in further details. The use case here is to alert regular congestion emission zones are regulated, sorry. And on the right side, also coming up very soon, health alert zones, where in this case, it's about alerting people where they have potential health risk. Sorry. We are going to talk today just about eco alert zones. It's an overview. I leave this slide in the PowerPoint so that as a summary. And we will come into the details in the next couple of slides. That's it from an introduction standpoint. I would give the mic, so to say, to Brittany, and also the mouse. Let me see if this works. It doesn't. Take Brittany, up to you now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about our Eco Alerts database, API, and products. So if you're unaware, basically an Eco Alert Zone is an area, and it could encompass a city, a region, a province. It really depends on the different country and the kind of restrictions that are in place. So it's an area that will restrict access to a certain area, or it will require a fee for a passenger vehicle to access that area. And this is like, for instance, Paris, you need a specific sticker on your car to enter that zone. So that is also covered in our database. So these zones exist to reduce the amount of traffic due to congestion or pollution. Basically just, yeah, to help the environment as well as be an easier accessible to pedestrians. So our data set at the moment contains zones that apply to passenger vehicles only.
Okay.
We can move to the next slide.
You should be able to move the slides. Let me know if it works.
Oh.
Yeah, very good.
Did I go too far? No.
Yeah.
Okay. So in our database, we have quite a few different attributes. So every zone has a specialized zone ID. It has a zone name. So in every country, the zones are called something different. Then they'll also have a location description. Say it's, yeah, the area within the A10 in Amsterdam or something like that. And then a description of what the zone is, what the requirements are, what the restrictions are, what vehicles can drive there. Then we also include our source. So all of our sources of these zones are official sources from either the municipality or government sites. Basically, whoever decides there should be a zone there, those are the sources that we're using. Then we also have different zone types. So zone types, basically there's two different main types of these Eco Alert zones. So there is a permanent zone or a temporary zone. Permanent zone is always in place. The restrictions are the same all the time. So that could be Monday to Friday from 12 to 6, you can't drive here, or Sunday to Sunday, 12 to 12, depending on what the restrictions are. So, and those restrictions are also then in the vehicle time, I always have a hard time with this word, yeah, not even gonna say it, sorry. So those are, it will have the time that applies to the different vehicles that are allowed. So it could be that diesel trucks or cars are only allowed to drive in the zone on Saturdays between 12 and 6, but other cars are allowed to drive during a different time. So we have all of those different restrictions in the API, as well as the different emission standards that apply to the vehicles. The other type of zones that we have are temporary zones. So these are zones that are activated only if there is a pollution alert. It usually does a tie with pollution or bad weather. So those zones we are monitoring and update on a daily basis and add to the active at the bottom of the field there. So it will tell you if the zone is currently active or not. So all of this data is encoded in UTF-8. It's provided in a JSON format, and we deliver it through an API. So this data can be grabbed from the API as much as you want throughout the day. It is only updated daily. With this metadata also comes polygons of the actual zones, and those zones are all digitized according to a high resolution imagery. There's a bit of a lag when I try to go to the next slide.
No, it's true. Yeah. Okay, let me help you.
So here, I know it's very hard to see. It's more just here so that when you get the slides, you can see. So this is an example of the metadata. So it's in the same structure as the attributes. You'll have the zone ID, the zone types, and then all the vehicles and the restrictions that apply to it. So we've created what we think is a great product because it's a centralized location for all information relating to these different zones. So these zones, we've all standardized the data. The geometry is all highly accurate and follows the exact structure of the roads. Our information is updated daily. So those updates pertain to the temporary zones that can be activated or deactivated. So we are checking that daily. However, if no zones become active, that might mean that there is not actually an update for that day, but no update is still an update. The server response time from our API is almost instant. So whenever you need to access the data, it's there for you. And with the delivery platform of an API, it's versatile and the data can be integrated into many different platforms. Another feature of the API is we have the fees and the penalties for each zone, and that's all shown in the local currency. So for Great Britain, it will be pounds. For Germany, it would be euros, that kind of thing. As well as the text of the description and the locations. We have that in both local languages as well as English. So for Germany, for instance, it would be in English and German. So here we have a list of our current coverage. You'll see most of Western Europe is green. Those are the countries we have zones for already in our API. These countries, we have all of the zones for that country that pertain to passenger vehicles. You'll see that Italy is green on the map, but not in the list yet. This is because Italy is in production, and we are adding zones as they are completed. So at the moment that our API database has about 200 to 300 zones, and Italy has a total of approximately 500 zones. So we're about halfway there of updating Italy to the fullest. So all of these countries here that are on the list, yeah, we have all of the zones for passenger vehicles. You'll see, for instance, there are certain countries that are gray that we haven't colored in. And that could be those countries are to be added, which we'll see on the next slide. But Denmark, for instance, I know was part of our scope, but Denmark does not have any eco alert zones that pertain to passenger vehicles. So we don't have any, we won't have any Denmark in our API. So here we have kind of an overview of our future scope. So we're doing this project in 4 phases. Western Europe had approximately 140 zones, and that's been completed. We are currently in production on Italy that has approximately 500 zones. And like I said, we have about 200 to 300 zones in the database already. Our target is to complete the rest of the phases by the end of the year. So that includes the rest of Europe as well as the rest of the world. So you can see our list here to the right. This list is not necessarily complete. As we go through and do our sourcing of these countries, we find maybe there's more zones than we initially found, or we do find that some zones are being postponed due to COVID. And we keep note of those zones that are postponed or that are planned for the future, and we are adding those to our database as they become active. So for instance, Amsterdam has a zone that's becoming active. The plan was to have that zone active as of November 1st. However, due to COVID, they've decided to postpone it until March. So once it's active, that zone will be in the database, as we will do with all future zones that we find. Okay. So then here we have some zone examples, just to give you an idea of what the data actually looks like. So here we have a satellite image of Paris. So Paris has 3 zones that encompasses it. So the blue zone is the center of Paris, and then you have the 2 zones for Greater Paris. Now the yellowish green zone is actually emergency scheme zone. So that means that that zone is a temporary zone, and depending on pollution alerts, that zone gets turned on or turned off. So that's one of our zones that we're daily doing checks on to see what kind of the pollution rates are in Paris. And for those daily checks, we're actually in contact with official sources to determine whether or not they're going to turn on the zone. Most zones give you a 24-hour notice whether a zone is going to be active or not. And that will be reflected in our API in the database. The activation time will show that it's going to be in the next 24 hours. There are certain cases we have seen that some zones become active in less than 24 hours, which we are also updating in the data on a daily basis. So every zone, basically every country has its own concept of when a zone will be active or not. And the nice thing about this API is everything is updated, so you don't have to worry about what the different things are happening in each country. We'll do that for you. And then on the next page, oh, I would both press it. So here we have a zone for central London. So here the text is just a little bit of example of what the metadata looks like. So this zone is actually active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except for Christmas. And here you can see a good example of how our geometry is digitized. So it follows the road network, so that is very accurate to determine which road is part of the congestion zone and which part is not. Which is very important, because then you need to know, for this instance, for this zone, you have to pay a standard fine to enter the zone. So it's really good to know what roads, exactly what roads are included in this zone and what zones are not. So here we have, this is also London, but this shows 2 zones in London. So this shows the congestion charge zone, as we saw in the previous slide, and this also has the London ultra low emission vehicle streets. So these zones, actually, the one on the left actually overlaps with the congestion charge. So if you're in that street, you have to be aware of both restrictions. That's for this case. In other cases, there are certain zones that are on top of each other, but only one zone could be active or the other. And that will be reflected also in our database and our daily updates. Either one zone will be on or and the other will be off, or depending on what happens, the other one will turn on. So here we have two German zones. And again, we have some metadata of the examples for you, or of the description for you to look at. And as you can see, the zone on the top of the screen actually has multiple polygons that pertain to the same zone. And this could be the case. So in that case, this is for Wiesbaden in Germany. So when you get this API, you would get all of this geometry together. And this is because the same restrictions apply to the right side of the zone as well as the left small polygon. This is generally doesn't happen too often. Generally, it's a centralized area that's restricted, usually around the center of a big city. But for this case, they wanted to include two different areas. So here we have 3 zones in Germany. So these ones are actually quite large zones, but you'll see they all border each other. And during our digitization process, none of these zones, while we do the borders, they are snapped to each other, which means that you can't be in one zone and also be in another zone. So these borders would completely align to each other. And then you can see which roads are exactly in the blue zone versus the yellow zone, which is very important because in certain cases, the restrictions are different as well as the penalties and what stickers you need on your vehicles.
So you want to highlight also that you have to consider the highway that cross it, right?
Yes, exactly. So the geometry here, we're can see there basically there's a line going through the center. So that's a major highway that's actually not included in the zone. That's also important to note is most of these zones don't include the major highways like a ring road around a city or major highways. So that's important with the geometry as well. Those major zones or major highways are always cut out of the zone. And that's for the case of that you can see that that highway does not have the same restrictions as the zone around. However, if you're planning a trip on that highway and then decide, oh, I want to stop in this city, it's nice to know that if you're going to exit off of that highway, then you need to have a specific sticker on your car or pay a fee or a fine, depending on what the restrictions are of that zone.
Thank you.
Well,
yeah, that's a very quick overview of what our eco alert zones looks like. And back to you, Caroline.
thank you very much, Brittany. That was certainly a very comprehensive overview. Before we move on to Q&A, I'd like to launch a new poll and ask our participants if they see how quickly they would see the possibility to implement a eco alert zone into their solution. We'll leave the poll on for about 30 seconds, and then we'll be able to move on to Q&A. I already see some questions in the chat box.
Very good. We're really in time, as promised. Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that. Is our service level agreement is going up to 48 hours that we guarantee the zone will be updated in our database. So, and also availability of the API is using the technology we use, near 99%. So very high service level agreement here.
Okay, I will now close the poll, and and move on to the question.
Good.
I can see a first question, possibly for you, Brittany. What would be the exact coverage for France? You showed us the map of detail map of Paris, but what would be the French coverage overall?
So the overall French coverage is actually quite large. France has these very large department zones that cover very large regions of France. So actually, most of France is covered as an eco-alert zone. And these zones are interesting because they're temporary zones that are only activated every once in a while, and only part of the zone is active. So then in that case, sometimes the geometry of the zone will change when a specific pollution alert occurs. One thing also to mention about France has different pollution levels. So depending on the pollution alert, and if the pollution alert is standardized for 4 days, then the restrictions will be one level. And then if the pollution alert is still ongoing, then the restrictions go to even a deeper level. And that's the same for most of the temporary zones in our database. In Spain as well, and in Italy, they have different levels depending on the pollution alerts that's in place.
But in other words, I think Brittany is every zones that are legally recognized as eco-alert zones are in the database, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Any zone that applies to a passenger vehicle, we have it in our database.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to question number 2. How many people in the team do you have to actually update your database on a daily basis? I think this one might be more directed to Thierry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think what needs to be said is that that's a very highly dynamic data content, right? That needs both good technology, good processes, and also people. So we have using both good technology to identify the changes, and I would call it editors, if you like, to verify the changes. For the major region, we have local language speakers, and as we expand the coverage, we will monitor the need for resources. But right now we're covered, and this product is live, and it's been used now for a couple of customers. So yeah, I hope it helped, but I think it's a mix of technology and people, good people.
Thank you. Moving on to the next one, I think that Brittany, you mentioned that there were many zones and that we were still working on expanding those the zones. How many? Why is there so many? Was the question in Italy?
Yeah, Italy is a special country. They like to. So we have a team of dedicated Italians helping us source this, because the data for these zones is not easily and readily available. So we're in close contact with the municipalities of the certain areas in Italy that have these zones. Basically, each region and each city in Italy has decided to create their own zone. So almost all cities in Italy have a zone, as well as maybe a temporary and a permanent zone. For instance, the region of Lombardy has about 200 plus zones. So that's where most of the zones come from. But for instance, also regions in the south of Italy also have very few zones. So it's really varied throughout the country. So this is why our sourcing team, it's very important that they're familiar with how the system works there. So they're helping us to gather all of the data needed to create the Italian zones.
Okay, thank you. Next question, moving on to our next question. Is there a roadmap for developing eco-alert zones in Japan?
Not unaware for the moment.
Yes, as far as I know, I don't think we have Japan on our list at the moment, which doesn't mean that we don't plan to add Japan. It's more, we haven't seen any zones that apply to passenger vehicles. Again, we are sourcing currently for the rest of the world zones, so the list may change and upgrade. So if we do find that there are zones in Japan for passenger vehicles, we would add those and plan to add those by the end of the year.
We surely add this to the list now.
Yes.
To the checklist list. Yeah, very good.
Yes.
Thank you for the question. Good questions. Any more?
Yes, there are more actually. Is it possible to display the polygons and the street-specific information on every map, or which maps on which map is the information created on? Two questions.
Information.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of Brittany. I think I could answer as well. Yeah.
The geometry is digitized based on satellite imagery. So we are. So it should basically line up with most maps. However, for certain customers, we have taken the geometry and then realigned it to the customer's map. So there is a service that we can provide to completely match it to the map that you are using in your system. So that's not a problem. And then, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
On which map is the information created?
Yeah, so it's just satellite imagery. So it's not a specific OpenStreetMap or Google Maps. It's literally just the satellite imagery.
Yeah, and even high density, I think accuracy imagery, right? Because you really have to go down to the crossroad and identify really what part of the crossroad is in and what part is out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
I don't see any more questions for the time being.
Very good.
I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and you will be receiving a copy of the slides and the recording shortly. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, Brittany, for this very comprehensive overview of our Eco Alert Zone, and speak to you very soon.
Yeah, thank you everyone again, and we will also have follow-up webinar with other contents that we'll be unveiling soon. So stay tuned, and I'm really also happy that we can make it in short time so that you can get back to work. Okay, thank you. It was good to see you, sort of. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.